It's no secret that KC Concepcion was the most electrifying player on the NC State Wolfpack last season. This season, he may be taking on an additional role. How do we feel about this?
You are Locked On Wolfpack, your daily podcast on the NC State Wolfpack, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Wolfpack Nation? It's time to get locked in with Locked On. Thanks for making Locked On Wolfpack your first listen each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. As always, terms apply. Happy Thursday to all. As always, I'm Grayson Boone, joined by former Wolfpack defensive tackle Kenton Gibbs. Kenton, on Thursday, ACC Network aired the ACC Road Trip for their visit to Raleigh and NC State football. Now, we're going to talk about the rest of that in just a bit. I want to start here with what we heard out of KC Concepcion when he joined the crew on set. Now, KC talked about some of the lofty goals he set for himself in 24, but he also said that he may be working out on punt return in 24. This caught me by surprise when he said it. I'd be lying to you if my first initial gut reaction was like, okay, I'm totally in on this. It sounds great. I'll be honest here. It worries me just a little bit.
You know, my initial reaction was that worry for this reason. When I think about punt return, kick return, and all that, I think, okay, this is a guy that's dynamic, playmaker. You know, he can do things with the ball in his hands. Does KC fit that criteria? Yes, absolutely. But then there's a second silent criteria that we don't really talk about out loud often because some players violate this, some don't. It's are you important enough to the offense or defense where we feel like it's potentially not worth it to have you back there? Because we've seen plenty of guys who could do really, really great things with the ball in their hands as a returner who were told, all right, nope, that's enough. Shut it down as a returner because you mean that much in terms of what you can do offensively, defensively. And the production that you give offensively or defensively is much tougher to replace than your production on special teams. And when I think about some of the guys that we have coming in particular, some of the young guys, I'm looking at a situation where I think you have multiple guys who should be really good on kick return, punt return right away. You have multiple guys who should be able to do that very well right away. I think that we have a very good receiver class coming in. I don't think we have a single player that can beat KC's level of receiver right away in this class. I hope I'm wrong. I would love to see all of these guys showing up and showing out in the way that I'm like, oh, man, I was wrong. We got 5 KCs in this, or 4 KCs. I believe we took 4 receivers. Whichever number it is, we got that many KCs in this class. I would love to see that. Again, it's a little bit like, I mean, hey, I trust the coaches. You know better than me. But also, are we sure we got to play him at kick return, punt return? Are we sure about that?
It's definitely a little bit of a difficult scale to balance because like you're talking about, him being so electrifying on this team, you want to find as many ways as you possibly can to get him the rock, whether it's on offense, potentially on special teams. You want to find ways to get him into open space because last year, as we saw, that's when the magic happens. But again, going back to my initial reaction here, throwing arguably one of your most valuable pieces to your offense on punt return, and I'm not saying this in a sense like punt returners frequently get injured. If he were to get injured on punt return, and I pray that this does not happen. Don't come for me if this happens. It's not me speaking this to an existence. I would feel so horribly bad for KC in that scenario. He would be getting injured in something that's not his main function. Not exactly doing something that provides the most value to this team, at least in my opinion. And so I look around at these other guys, maybe even some young guys that I would feel a little bit more comfortable in sliding into that position. Jonathan Paylor's name has been getting tossed around a lot. I've heard him potentially working out with the kick return team, potentially sliding into some offense early. Jonathan Paylor is a guy that, for me, I thought of, okay, maybe you could see Jonathan Paylor at punt return early this season. You also have Jalen Coit, who handled all the punt return duties last year. He is very much still on the roster, which makes him more than capable of doing it again here in 24. I certainly appreciate the coaching staff wanting to tinker a little bit with their best offensive player from a year ago. I'm not exactly sold on the idea that the risk is worth the reward. I think there's several other players on the roster that are more than capable of doing this and at a very high level as well. We've also mentioned Hollywood Smothers has been spotted taking the kickoffs. Hollywood Smothers could also, I would presume, handle the punt return duty. Another guy with electrifying breakaway speed that can make a difference on special teams. This is going to be an insane comparison, but stick with me here. Devin Hester. When you think about Devin Hester, he's one of the best returners in probably the history of football. The way he was able to change a game on kick return and also punt return, both in college and in the NFL, is really something we've never seen before. But Devin Hester was a specialist in that sense. If you look up his statistics as a wide receiver, they're very underwhelming. That's not his main function.
And as a corner, which he played in college.
Exactly, yes. His bread and butter, cut and dry, was being a returner, both punt and kickoff. That was his function. I think way back then, Miami did a really good job at designating him for that. You are the guy for this purpose. We're going to throw you in there, and you're going to change the game. And then he went in there and did it. I'd also have to assume that Miami felt more than comfortable with who they had at the wide receiver position. And it was certainly not the same scenario that we're looking at now. A piece that was electrifying on offense, and they wanted to try him out in a different position. This was not that. So different scenario, and I know that's why it's a little bit of a lengthy comparison here, but specialists, at least in my mind, they are called specialists for a reason. It's because they specialize in that particular area. And just for my own comfortability, I think I would prefer to see Kevin Concepcion stay in the offense instead.
Yeah, and I'm sure that this is just to, get them live reps and get it, or not live, but get them reps of fielding punts and whatnot. But I want you to think about something for a second, right? You took it to the pro comparison of Devin Hester. I want to take it to the pro comparison of an entire position. The running back market overnight became one of the least valuable. How did that happen?
True.
Not because running backs stopped being good. I mean, we have not seen a ton of guys who are like Saquon Barkley when he's healthy. And just like that's something you see every day. It's not a guy with that much power, that much quickness, that much straight line speed all in one. But it became less valuable because more guys could do it at a really good level. Yep. There were more of these backs that were coming out of nowhere in terms of a Tevin Coleman who wasn't a super high pick, a Matt Breida who wasn't a super high pick. Yes, having a Christian McCaffrey who was picked in the first round and the Heisman finals expected to be all those things was great, but you also have a lot of other players that, objectively speaking, they did their thing as well, and they weren't taken in that slot. So what am I saying when I say that? I'm saying that I think that other players could do to that position what, these undrafted guys and these Phillip Lindsays and whatnot did to the running back position. Austin Eckler is another one that comes to mind, did to the running back position in terms of you were not selected super high, the whole world wasn't in on you, whatever the case may be, but you were good enough to be to a level where people said, you know what, the replacement for you, I don't have to draft a guy very high to get a good one. It's the same deal here. I'm not sure you want to spend a ton of team's capital on this position. And in terms of capital, I just mean a guy taxing his body, potentially being in one of the most dangerous plays in football objectively. Again, I'm knocking on wood here. But the reality is, you want a situation where if you can keep him off of that, you will. And again, I'm not against just fielding punts just to stay active in it and practice and whatnot when it's not like, hey, these guys are trying to take your head off, dude. But, in the game, it's like, that's tough, And even if you are going to use them in that way, make him your break in case of emergency guy, which I've seen before where there's like a player that's like, hey, the offense is dead. We need a spark. Go back there. Go back there and make it happen instead of like you're back there every time.
I wouldn't hate the idea of possibly in a game, maybe the offense is stalling, their tires are stuck in the mud. On one of these possessions, we're getting the ball back. You need something electrifying to happen on the field. Maybe you stick Casey in that scenario as like a home run attempt. If he runs a punt back and it changes the trajectory of a game, that's an absolute win for all parties involved. So again, I appreciate the creativity. I appreciate tossing the idea around one of your best players, putting him in a spot where he can change the game in a blink of an eye. But just my own comfortability, I feel like it'd be just doing a little too much. I think he's so good in what he's already doing in this Robert and I offense. I think you stick with what you got and you don't take the risk potentially doing too much with him. Let us know what you think. If you think Kevin Concepcion should be returning punts, or maybe you're a little bit apprehensive about it here in 2024, let us know down in the comments. Coming up next, we're talking about another electrifying piece of this offense. There was a clip that went out on social media on Thursday of our freshman transfer wide receiver, Noah Rogers. I might spend the rest of this episode just talking about what I saw. It is unbelievable. Coming right up after a quick word from our sponsors. Our first sponsor of the day is Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. This, of course, makes getting tickets faster and easier than ever before. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. So with their killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Talking about their last-minute deals, you can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, you name it, they got it. Toggling their all-in pricing feature on the app will show your total up front, so you receive zero surprises at checkout. And as always, you can get that panoramic view of your seat in the app before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect upon arrival. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And again, create an account and use redeem code LOCKEDONCollege. LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, Locked On College, for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Middle portion of our Thursday show, it's time to talk about Noah Rogers. We all know his backstory. He was a 5-star wide receiver coming out of high school, chose to go to Ohio State over NC State, goes up to a Columbus, doesn't play, returns home, and we are thrilled about the idea of what he could be here at the Wolfpack. Looked great in the spring game, was really progressing over the summer. And then we see this clip. Shout out our guy, Drew. He turned us on to it on Thursday. A practice rep, Noah Rogers against Aiden White. Unfortunately, we couldn't see who the quarterback was, but being that it was a battle of ones, I would hope it was Grayson McCall slinging the rock. This ball is so perfectly placed over not Noah Rogers' back shoulder, but Aiden White's back shoulder. And Noah Rogers basically climbs the ladder, goes up over Aiden's turned head, balances in the air, it comes down with it, and then probably goes on to score if it were a live rep. That type of play is something that we have not had out of a wide receiver since probably like Kelvin Harmon. Kelvin Harmon was a beast when it came to those 50-50 balls and keeping that body balance in air and then coming down with it. What I saw in just that short clip, I'll bring it up on here for those of you who have not seen it yet. So here's the clip, and I know it's fast. I'm going to keep it on loop. I could honestly sit here and watch this clip for the remainder of this show. The way he climbs the ladder just very quickly at the last second, snatches this ball out of the air behind the turned head of Aiden White. And make no mistake about it, we talk about Aiden White on this show a ton. That's one of the best cornerbacks in the country. And I know you're saying, all right, slow down. It's day 2 of fall camp. This is a 3-second clip from practice and a practice rep. I got all that. Look at this clip and tell me it does not get you fired up to kick this season off. It doesn't get you fired up to think about what this offense could actually be when they hit the grass here at the end of the month. We were all in on Noah Rogers way back in January. We were in on him in the spring game in April. We are more in than we have ever been here at the beginning of August.
And this ties perfectly into what we were talking about earlier in the show with KC having to do too much. Because when you think about why KC had to do so much, again, this is no disrespect to the players around him. It just, the production just was not there. Do you know who our leading receiver was on the team last year? KC, of course. You know who had our longest reception of the year last year? KC, of course. That makes sense, right? Do you want to know who was our leading rusher outside of Brennan Armstrong last year? KC. Do you want to know who had our longest rush of the year last year? KC. So I'm saying all this not to say like, oh, everybody around them is the island of misfit toys and they're terrible and all this and all that. No. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is a player like Noah Rogers being not just a pressure release valve for a great guy, being the guy in and of himself that you're like, who do we double? It's no longer a situation of, okay, we'll figure it out. We'll adjust. We'll basically go box and one around Kevin Concepcion. We'll run a zone, but leave somebody man on him. And we'll be okay with our zones being stretched thin because these guys couldn't get open in the month of Sundays. When Noah Rogers can separate from you both with his route running and vertically, you throw that ball up in the right space, he can separate from you even if you're right up under him. So having a guy like that, that's a baller in his own right, that can devastate defenses in his own right, that to me will take this offense over the edge and to the next level. Because again, you're no longer counting on KC has to be the guy. He has to be the guy through the air. He has to be the guy on the ground. He has to be the guy on punt return. He has to be the guy. It's no longer that situation. Our backfield with Jordan Waters and company, it's no longer that situation. Our wide receiving core, where you're looking at all of these guys, all of these weapons. I mean, there's too many to really name. In the words of Kendrick Lamar, how many options you really got? I mean, it's too many options. You know what I mean? Like it's too many options. There's only one ball, and that's a great problem to have instead of looking around like, and again, this is not to be disrespectful. And I know some of y'all are like, please stop saying that. We get it. You're not trying to disrespect anybody. But the reality is last year, Grayson and I talked about how we were in the day 8 or 9 of camp before we heard a positive peep about any wide receiver not named Kevin Concepcion. So, this is big time. Noah Rogers doing what he's doing against not just anybody, not just a guy, not just a random, like, hey, this is some walk-on that's never going to dress out, that may see a little bit of time on one kickoff on senior night. No. This is a bona fide stud that we haven't seen guys go up and snatch one over like that virtually in his career. And Noah Rogers doing it to him day 2 of camp. That's big time.
He did that over an all-ACC preseason cornerback selection. Shout out to Aiden White. That was announced also on Thursday. He's first team all-ACC in the preseason. That's who he went up and mossed in practice. We've talked a good deal about some of the X factors and the potential for X factors in this offense. Make no mistake about it. If Noah Rogers pops the way that we've all been dreaming that he could be in this offense, he is one of the few guys on this team that takes this whole thing to another level. If you can take the top off of defense, or really any parts of the defense, the way he can run routes, that makes us so much more dynamic than a lot of us can really even conceptualize here at this moment. I can't wait to see it at the end of the month, but until then, we still have to think about it and then turn on the PS5 and do it in the game, because that's all we can do right now. This and practice clips that are only 3 seconds, but you start to look up championship game tickets because of how ridiculous that catch was. And again, just to reiterate, I know it's just a practice rep. I know it means nothing. It's competitive, but it's not, it's not game speed. I got all that. The level of wide receiver play has been lacking, to be honest here. It has been lacking for quite some time. I know we've had the Emeka Mezis and the Kelvin Harmons. We've never seen somebody like Noah Rogers. This is the number 1 wide receiver in the state of North Carolina in 2022. NC State has not had somebody like Noah Rogers before. And for him to put this on tape as early as day 1 and day 2 of fall camp, it just gets that hype train, and you drive it in a couple more gears because it's getting scary. It's scary hours. And real quick, reverting back to your point on KC, when you have to worry so much about KC as a defense based on what he did to teams last year, there's going to be times where maybe you put a little too much attention on him, and then boom, Noah Rogers is going to take the top off your defense. Or then boom, you have Justin Jolie busting through the seam. He's going for 6. Keenan Jackson on the outside. Terrell Anderson on the outside. Wesley Grimes on the outside. Takari Collins on the outside. There's so many ways that this team will be able to defeat you. It is terrifying. It feels like it's going to turn into Russian roulette for a lot of these defenses. They're going to have to pick and choose their battles, and as soon as they choose wrong, it's 6. And then not to mention our run game to supplement all these weapons we have through the pass game. So the offense is maybe more promising than we've had here in a long time. And I mean a long time. And we can't wait to see what it looks like when we kick this thing off. Coming up next, we're going to get into more of the commentary that we heard from the ACC Road Trip in Raleigh. ACC Network had really interesting interviews with both Tony Gibson and Robert and I. We're going to dive into them after a quick word from our sponsors. Our second sponsor of the day is eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, that's the formula for winning championships. But it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, and LED headlights, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number 1 ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. That's because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Rounding out our Thursday show, wanted to spend some time talking about that ACC road trip that visited Raleigh this week for the opening of fall camp. Now, ACC Network does this every year. What they do is they take a team of hosts and they travel to all, I was about to say 14 members. Now it's 17 members of the ACC conference. And they sit down with key players, the coach, just kind of like an extension from ACC kickoff a week ago. Just kind of an inside look to what they're looking at practice, what they're feeling about the beginning of the season. It just supplements all the media buzz here before we get going. Two of the guys on this football team that I love hearing from are Tony Gibson and Robert and I. We hear from them in limited capacity over the course of the season. They have their weekly time with the media, but it's never really as much as you hope it could be. These two are some of the most fascinating figures we've had at NC State for quite some time. And I remember last summer we ran an episode asking if they could be the best coordinating duo that we've seen at NC State. How do we feel about that now? I think we're certainly on the right track, but we'll start here with Tony Gibson. I could listen to Tony Gibson talk about defense for hours on end. I'm going to say the same thing about both of these coordinators, but Tony Gibson is exactly how you want your defensive coordinator to sound. He's exactly how you want him to talk about the concept of playing defense. And he was saying he feels really good about this bunch. He's very uncompromising on his standard, and he makes it known from day one of the new season that looking at some of these defenses he's had these last couple of years, they have placed the standard for all these teams afterward to still uphold as the year goes on. And he was saying, despite Peyton Wilson leaving and several other key pieces leaving, he expects this new bunch here in 24 to still maintain that level of dominance on the defensive end. One of the quotes that stuck with me immediately, Mark Herzlich was asking about how he feels about the transfer portal. And basically Tony Gibson said it as bluntly as you could say it. He said, if guys aren't tough enough to play for NC State, to play for me in this defensive system, I'll escort them out the door and into the parking lot. He had no problem saying, if you're not tough enough to play for me, you can jump in that portal. That's the exact mindset I want my defensive coordinator to have. Uncompromising, does not settle for anything less than elite play. That's exactly what bleeds into this defense and makes them go.
Yeah, there's a difference between proactivity and reactivity. The best defenses are proactive instead of reactive, and that's as the old saying goes, the players take on the temperament of the coach. The players take on the attitude of the coach. What do I mean by that? Tony Gibson does not say, oh, man, this team, they run the ball so well, we've got to play with two defensive tackles on the field all game. No. Well, they run the ball well? That's fine. I'm going to play with my three down linemen. I'm going to play with my three backers. I'm going to play with my nickel. And we're going to be just fine. Ain't that right, boys? And that's just what it is. He's that kind of guy that's like, there's the thermometer guys who tell you what the temperature of everything around. That's all they do. And then there's the thermostat guys who they can change the temperature to be what you want it to be or what they want it to be. They'll say, hey, listen, this is what we need to do. This is how we need to do it. Tony Gibson's one of those guys. And again, it bleeds through. It bleeds through because I really don't think people understand how good of a job he did the year that Peyton Wilson and Isaiah Moore both got hurt.
Yeah.
And the defense didn't miss a beat. It didn't miss a beat. We went from this is going to be the most dominant trio of linebackers that we may have ever seen here to there's one of them left, and he's the guy that, you know, he's not the guy that everybody looked at like, hey, he's the leader, he's the guy, he's the one. And yet they still showed up and showed out. You know, so I think that Tony Gibson, in his words, it definitely matches up with his personality bit for bit.
And the other part I want to talk about that Tony Gibson was talking about, we've said it on here before, but there was a report that freshman linebacker Elijah Groves had put on 18 pounds this summer working with Coach Thunder. Herzlich was asking Gibson about him, and he said, he's a creature. If that doesn't get you fired up about the prospects of Elijah Groves here in the near future, I don't know what else to tell you. He didn't compare him to Peyton Wilson, but he said frame-wise, already as just a freshman, he looked physically similar to how Peyton Wilson was. That's terrifying to try and conceptualize. A true freshman who just entered the program over the summer immediately goes into the lab with Coach Thunder and comes out looking like Peyton Wilson. Gibson kind of alluded to the fact that he doesn't quite know yet about how much run that Groves will get here in 24, but he said if it's not this season, it'll be very shortly after. Sounds like Tony Gibson's got a monster cooking up in the lab. Again,
folks, us guys from Locked On Wolfpack, we watch the film. We do the work. I promise you, the amount of film that Grayson and I break down and like watch of high school guys now. Now, I'm not going to lie and say I got the all 22 of high school guys like I do in college. Mostly it's their huddles. It's other players that they played against huddle because I'm like, how did he play when he was playing against this 4-star, 5-star from over here? But in all seriousness, that young man, it's Peyton Wilson set a standard to the point where you know how every quarterback that can throw off platform, every quarterback that can make awkward throw angles now gets labeled as Mahomes-esque, or it's a Patrick Mahomes-like throw. Peyton Wilson has kind of set that standard, and I'm going to tell you, a guy being thrown in that conversation in any regard, on day 1 or 2 of being in the program, seriously, Alexa, play dead because some hitters are indeed in trouble.
And then jumping over to the comments made by offensive coordinator Robert Anae. I said this a couple times last year, but Robert Anae embodies a mad scientist. And he puts out some of my favorite sound clips of the season. And I remember last year it was about being explosive. And somebody asked him, how exactly is the team going to change that? And he says, by being explosive. And I love how blunt he is. I think I've even compared him to Mike Leach in some ways, just very quirky, unusual answers. Still gets the point across, but you're like, okay, there's maybe a little bit of a screw loose, and that's who I want to be running my offense. And they're asking Robert and I about the early days of fall camp, and he was basically just saying, well, we got to work on throwing the ball to the open guy, and when the ball comes to you, you catch it. And it was kind of funny because the interviewers didn't really know how to handle him. Then he went on to talk about some of the young wide receivers that he's been thoroughly impressed with so far. He named Keenan Jackson and Terrell Anderson. He said they have sparked early. For a guy that talks so much about being explosive last year, he's talking about 2 young freshmen sparking right out of the gate. Hello, dynamite offense. Now, he also talked about Duke Scott. So the buzz continues to rise about freshman running back Duke Scott. Keeps bringing up his name. And if Robert and I is thoroughly impressed with him, perhaps we'll also see Duke Scott get some run on the field. He mentioned Paylor has been kind of working out in some KC-type roles. Hello, that's what we said when he first committed, basically KC 2.0. And then the main tagline that we heard out of Robert and I, talking about Grayson McCall, and he said, quote, in all my years and all my guys and breaking in first-year quarterbacks, Grayson McCall is the best I've had. He said he's mastering it at a higher level, and I look forward to keeping him healthy. This goes back to what McCall was talking about at ACC Kickoff, saying that he is comfortable in any type of offense. To get that reiteration from Robert and I just a week later, I don't know how much more excited I can get about the thought of this offense this year. If Robert and I is excited about it already, Grayson McCall is supposedly the best first-year quarterback he's had in this system. All the pieces are around him. We might end up breaking a couple scoreboards this year.
Hey, Grayson, who was the wide receiver that I said was the best true receiver out of all the young guys that we bought in?
You said it was Keenan Jackson.
This is all right. Enough of tooting my own horn here, but very seriously, Keenan Jackson is a guy that watching him, he was so developed in high school. I'm like, when he gets with Joker Phillips, when he gets with Anae, when he gets in this office and they teach him the ins and outs about separating from college DBs, he has the physical ability to do it. That's not a doubt in my mind at all. I just think that he's more of a football player than a camp guy. So maybe that's why he didn't get the 5-star love and all that. But that young man, I'm telling you right now, buy the stock early. Buy it. Buy it right now. Buy it. The minute that he converted from the Dirty Foot Club to us, the minute he flipped and made the best decision one could ever make with their life. Let's just be honest. Leaving the Dirty Foot Club alone is absolutely one of the best decisions. The minute he made that decision, I said, all right, let me get in the lab. Let me focus on this kid. And I just came away so thoroughly impressed. And lo and behold, I am not the only one. It's phenomenal to see that he's doing everything that he's doing at a high level. Anderson is another name that, you expected to hear because he, I believe, was the highest rated out of all of the pure receivers that were brought in NC State. So you were expecting that out of him. And, of course, Paylor in the KC roles, again, I think that that's a role that is tailored to a guy like him. If we don't want to call it the KC roles, the Nyheim Hines freshman year role, where you get it to him on jet sweeps, you get it to him on screens, you get it to him on drag routes across the middle. You get it to him in ways that it's like, hey, there's you, there's space, there's the ball, there's defenders. Figure it out. And I'm sure he will because he has that natural instinct as a runner. When that ball is under his right arm, I'm worried. I'm worried if I'm a defensive coordinator in terms of Jonathan Paylor. So all the things that we're hearing align with the things that we believe already. And this isn't just a confirmation bias thing where we're like, well, we think it, and they're telling us something close. So these are virtually the exact same things that we were saying about these players coming to pass. So it's exciting to see. And hopefully our exact predictions for this team come to pass as well when the season actually hits.
I'm giving an eye the spatula, the chef hat, and I'm getting the hell out of the kitchen. Let him cook. He has all the pieces around him that he needs to cook. He has the quarterback to run the whole system. It's starting to smell good already. And we're only 1 day into August. I can't even use the little Uzi Vert meme. I've only been here about 3 days. What do you say?
Yeah.
I only been out here about 3 days or so. Yeah, I can't even say that because of how short that they've been in fall camp here. Let them cook, man. It's everything you want to be hearing this early in the cycle out of both your defensive coordinator and your offensive coordinator. We just can't wait to put the ball down. That'll do it for us here on Thursday. As always, thank you all so much for joining us. Be sure to hit that like button. Drop a comment down in the comment box. Tell us what you think about KC potentially returning punts in 24. Tell us about the impact that you think Noah Rogers is going to have on this offense in 24. And tell us what you thought. If you happen to watch the road trip, tell us any additional thoughts you had for maybe some of the players, Coach Doran, or the two coordinators we talked about here on this program. Be sure to mash that subscribe button if you have not already, and we will see you all back here on Friday to close out the week. Until then, go Pack.
Go Pack.